I'd like to show you another game by AlphaZero. You might recall that AlphaZero was created by the DeepMind research team, and it uses machine learning or reinforcement learning to develop neural networks. And the team tested its strength against Stockfish last year in a match, which is consistently one of the strongest chess engines in the world. So a year after their initial publication, DeepMind's work has been peer-reviewed and just published in the journal Science. And to coincide with that publication, DeepMind have released a further 210 games from a match against Stockfish, and they are absolutely fascinating. And I'm privileged to have been sent 20 of those games in advance, and I've been looking through them, and I'd like to share some of those games with you. They are really quite extraordinary. Quick word on why AlphaZero is so special. Basically, traditional chess engines are programmed with thousands of rules, human rules, to help with an evaluation function, the search function. But AlphaZero isn't given any human rules at all. It's basically just given the initial rules of chess, how the pawns move, how the bishop moves, for example. And then it plays against itself and creates its own rules with reinforcement learning. So it develops neural networks, having played itself thousands of times. And through this training process, it took just 4 hours for AlphaZero to become the strongest chess entity on the planet, with an estimated ELO of around 3,400. And using that same reinforcement learning, it went on to defeat the strongest engines that played shogi and Go, to incredibly complex strategic board games. And this is the point, that reinforcement learning can be applied to different settings. So, obviously different strategic board games, but also to solve complex problems in the real world as well. And this is the really exciting thing about the algorithm that's been developed. Before I show you one of the games that AlphaZero played against Stockfish, just a few bullet points let me show you that just give the conditions that this match was played under between AlphaZero and Stockfish. I just want to highlight one of the things there, that additional matches were played. Basically, they wanted to be absolutely sure that they'd created something very special, and so they played this match against Stockfish, but they also tested it with against Stockfish with common human openings, a match with that. Also opening positions that were used in the 2016 TSEC World Championship, that is the top chess engines championship. They also tested it against the most recent version of Stockfish, and also against a variant of Stockfish that used a very strong opening book. And in all cases, in all these separate matches, AlphaZero came out on top. So I think we should have a look at this game. As I said, 20 games were shown to me in advance from the match, and these were specially selected by the English Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, who's been working with DeepMind over the past few months, looking at these games, all the games actually, and he will be publishing a book along with Natasha Regan, who is an England international. She's played for the England women's team, and she is a mathematician. And so Matthew has concentrated on the chess side of the operation, and Natasha has kind of explained the mathematics behind AlphaZero, and that book will be coming out in January. I'll give details of that at the end of this video. But let's look at this game because it's fantastic. I was speaking to Matthew Sadler, who was incredibly impressed by the style of AlphaZero, and that really comes across in this game. It really is doing something quite special, actually, that humans don't generally do. And also computer chess engines, standard computer chess engines, don't do either. So this game was played in a match where neither AlphaZero or Stockfish were using an opening book. And it's very interesting to see how AlphaZero is basically playing, it's worked out an opening which actually looks like a very human opening on its own. So this is a pretty standard kind of English opening. And now in another game between AlphaZero and Stockfish, Stockfish played d6 here, but it went a5. b6 is the most popular move in most databases, but a5 looks like a reasonable move and is very typical for this opening. And now, for example, Melkumian against Ulyanov went bishop b2 and e5. And let me just show you this one very quickly, because Ulyanov succeeded in exchanging off these bishops. And you should compare with what happens in this game. It's very interesting. Melkumian made a strategic mistake. Now, Stockfish plays an interesting maneuver with the knight e4 and then knight g5, and this is quite well known in human chess. And the idea is potentially to bring the queen out into play on the king side. One could play knight takes knight here and bishop b2 or h4, but it's interesting to see how AlphaZero plays. First of all, b5. Keeping the queen side closed for a moment, and we'll see the reason for that in a second. It allows the structure to be damaged on the king side, and allows also for black to take a pawn straight away. So this is very interesting. So there's a double attack. How many traditional chess engines would allow a pawn to be taken at such an early stage? And I think, well, to answer my own question, I suspect not many. And this is one aspect of AlphaZero's play which is very strong, in that it doesn't always abide to the traditional rules of human chess, and indeed most traditional chess engines, about material. It's much freer with material. It thinks more about activity than material in many cases. So at the moment it's only one pawn, and for that one pawn AlphaZero has a nice open file against the king. It also has two bishops, so watch out for those. And now Stockfish goes on a little adventure with the queen. And what's interesting is that AlphaZero is very keen to give up material, to push black into taking another pawn. So it's encouraged black to take this pawn and puts the rook back. That preempts f5 actually, so f5 comes. Now castles queenside. So at the moment it's 2 pawns down, and it is encouraging Stockfish to take another pawn here. Well, what would happen in that case? This does look actually very risky, because the queen actually gets into trouble. So a threat here. And this looks quite sticky. We're not trapping the queen straight away. There are ways out, but somehow doesn't look great. And in fact, yeah, when I stuck this on my very simple, my very basic chess engine, the more it looked at this, the better it got. So Stockfish declines the third pawn and prudently covers g7. And now the queen runs away. Now this is interesting. So at the moment, black is 2 pawns up. And I can think many of us would be in a big rush to prove our compensation, to prove that somehow we are doing something on these files. But watch how AlphaZero plays. It's very laid back. King b1. And now it brings this rook back. Fascinating. And after a4, it just puts the king in the corner. Now, this is absolutely remarkable. So it's basically just saying to black, okay, I've got long-term compensation. It's not panicking in any way at all. Putting the king to, well, arguably the safest square on the board, where it's on a dark square covered by its beautiful bishop. And, well, as we'll see, clearing the back rank for white's pieces, actually. Just watch what happens. This is amazing. Rook g7, so that reinforces the king side. And now e4. So finally it's time to strike. And if this is taken, well, brings the bishop on a nice diagonal, and we might advance with f4 and then probably d5, and then things start to open. Once black can't close it with e5, then this starts to look serious. So after e4, Stockfish keeps the position closed. And now c5. Interesting. This is a kind of global front that AlphaZero is creating. So if this is captured, then yes, the position closes for a bit, but e5 is vulnerable and white can switch to attacking here. That's interesting. So one rook kept here, and now we can see one of the reasons for actually bringing this rook back. So it realized that it would be useful elsewhere. But pawn takes not played. Queen e7, stepping back. And rook c1. So it's using the rook potentially on the c file. Knight f6. So finally Stockfish is trying to sort itself out, but e5. And now this is great. So after pawn takes, instead of capturing, that's now, well, the rook swings into action on the e-file. So Stockfish gives one back. So it's still only 2 pawns at this stage. And if this is taken, well, I guess the queen swings into play, and maybe d5 is coming. Queen f8, just stepping out of the e-file. Now, watch what happens. d5. This is now pawn number 3. Just gives away that pawn, just so that this diagonal is open. So these bishops looking quite special now. And that bishop with no opponent looking incredibly strong. Bishop g4. So that bishop trying to get into the game. f3. Now if that's taken, then rook f1 and rook takes, and the pressure will be too much on the f-file. So bishop d7. Remember, it's 3 pawns so far. Queen c3. So finally AlphaZero has managed to get this battery on the long diagonal. Knight h5. Rook e5. Pressure building. Doubling on the e-file. So this knight comes back. Queen d4. Still no real rush here. This is such an interesting position. This is incredible. Stockfish now took pawn number 4. which loosens things a little bit here. But there are good reasons why it did that. Now, when I was looking at this, I thought, well, hang on. Surely black wants to bring this rook into the game and exchange off pieces. Now, this did not happen, but let's see why not. And this is amazing. Just watch this. After rook takes, knight takes. And now a winning move for white is to play b6. Such a beautiful move. And black is utterly lost here. So let's make a kind of pass move and understand why this is so strong. So if h5, and perhaps, you know, bringing the king here, then bishop a6. So black is completely cut. It is just can't control both sides of the board. So if that's taken, then the pawn rolls on and we get a queen, and black's queen here is overloaded. So that's one thing. What else we got? If bishop c8 covering here, we'll take on e8. Once again, the queen is overloaded because of this. Or let me see what else we've got. King h7. Let's take a look at that. Then we take here, and this is great. We can go into an endgame. Everything comes off, and if king takes, then bishop takes a6, bishop takes b7, and this b pawn will roll through. Amazing stuff. And in this position after b6, well, yeah, black is just gone. So the rook can't move because of queen h8. The bishop can't move because of rook takes. Yeah, it's utterly lost after b6. Very beautiful. So that's why Stockfish took pawn number 4. And now, again, this is incredibly beautiful. Bishop b1. So I told you king a1 was the right square for the king. It makes room for white's pieces. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's see one of the reasons for playing bishop b1. So, for example, rook c8 seems a plausible move. Then we take here, and after queen f7, let's play the queen back to d4, just maintaining the pressure on the long diagonal and threatening bishop a2, and black's king just gets cut completely here. So after bishop b1, that was the last move. Bishop c6, rook here, and rook f7. Basically, white is breaking through. Now, what's interesting is that AlphaZero doesn't rush into it. It doesn't take the piece straight away, which, well, I suspect this is good for white, this endgame. But white can do better than this. There's actually no rush. After rook f7, instead of taking on f6, rook g1 with threats here. And then queen f4. There's no rush. Still don't need to take that piece. And still no rush. This is amazing stuff. Even allowing the knight to escape, because if bishop takes queen, then rook takes queen. But AlphaZero has judged this perfectly. So if the queen goes back, then bishop takes g6, crashes through. So rook f6. And now, again, no need to take that rook. f4. Just wants to open up the position. This is absolutely fantastic. Now, finally, this rook is taken, but not by the bishop, by the rook, and then f5. What extraordinary power that white's pieces exude from the back rank. And black is lost here. In fact, Stockfish manages to escape to an endgame, but it's just losing. This pawn is simply too strong. You can see that white threatens rook f1, and well, this pawn will go through. So basically Stockfish gives up the knight. Now we've got a situation where it's bishop against two pawns, all on the same side, but actually white has control here. And I mean, this is fairly easy to win. But it's still very interesting to see how AlphaZero managed to win this one. Because it's very beautiful again. The king steps into black's position. And just watch the way it does it very carefully. So the king is going for a wander, and the rook holds everything. And now the king steps in. Okay, make sure that pawn is defended. And here Stockfish resigned, or it's, who knows, its operators resigned, I don't know. Okay, why is this suddenly lost? Well, basically, in combination with the king coming to b6, white is going to play bishop g4 and then bishop to c8, and basically take this pawn, and then if black manages to defend with the rook, then it'll be white's chance to activate the rook, and in combination with the two bishops it'll be able to attack black's king, and it's over basically. I absolutely love that game, and I think it demonstrates very well how AlphaZero really plays in such a dynamic and aggressive way. Doesn't mind about giving up pawns. It's all about piece activity. It's funny, when I was playing through some of these games, it reminded me of the way Shirov plays sometimes, actually, with just, not really caring too much about material. It's all about piece activity. So as I mentioned, a book is going to be appearing in January, published by New in Chess, and that's written by Matthew Sadler and Natasha Regan, and it will feature many of the games played in this match, and should be very, really very interesting, worth getting. And Matthew Sadler said he thought that the way that AlphaZero played, it's crucial for chess professionals to know about this. And I think, really, from what I've seen of these games, really should changes in quite a profound way that we should all think about chess, actually, and what's good chess strategy. Anyway, I'll be presenting more of these games very soon, and I hope you enjoyed that.